On February the 14th, about 269 or 270 AD, there was a man. We would call him in our modern English like Rudolph Valentino. He became known as Saint Valentine. And there was an emperor of the Roman Empire, Claudius II, or Claudius the Cruel, he was known as. He had forbidden marriage. Now, he did it for a reason, because usually men, when they got married, they were exempt from the army for 1 or 2 years to try to get together a life before they went into war. And Claudius, because of the expansion of the Roman Empire, and they had to maintain all the borders. So they had a very large army, and they had to have a very large percentage of their male population in the army. So he had forbidden marriage until his campaigns were over. And there was a pastor in Rome. Now you have to realize that the Catholic Church had not begun yet. So these are not Catholics. Valentine is not a Catholic. He's not a Catholic priest or anything, but they will tell you that he was in most histories, but he was not. He was a Baptist at his time. Now, there wasn't any such thing as a marriage license at this time, so there was no marriage license to get. But usually when couples would become married, they would live together, they would go before a church or a group of people, as they did in Israel. They would go before the local synagogue, and they would make an announcement. They'd get up and they would bless them, and then they would go home and cohabit as man and wife. Now, there wasn't any marriage license here for Valentine to get, or Valentino, but he still performed marriage ceremonies. He would bless marriages, and it was forbidden by Claudius to do this. He was finally arrested. Now, before we go into any of that, there's a lot of Valentine's Day was not known as Valentine's Day at that period of time. Valentine's Day was a day that later on in history we celebrate the martyrdom of Valentine, and we attribute it to love. Originally, in mid-February, this is early spring now, was spent celebrating the feast of Lupercalia. In Rome, in the Roman Empire, which was a large portion of Europe, and Eastern Europe, and Northern Europe even, and Western Europe, they had a holiday. And the men would sacrifice a goat. Now, goats were known for their prolific mating and productivity. And so they would sacrifice a goat. They would take the goat's skin off of the goat, and the man would make a whip out of the skin of the goat. Now, the women in the Roman Empire that were single or unattached, they would line up along the streets. And the men would go out there and whip the women with the goat skin whips. Now, that doesn't sound very romantic, does it? Sharon, does that? Marilyn, I don't think that sounds very romantic. But this is what happened. They would whip the women with the goat skin whips, and it supposedly would make them fertile. And then they would take a vessel and put names in it. And the men would draw cards out of the names, and they would draw a card with a woman's name on it, and the woman would be, the man would go to the woman's home or wherever she was, and they would begin to cohabit and have sexual relationships, sometimes for the rest of the month and sometimes for the whole year. until the next Valentine's Day, and then they would pick new partners. Now, that's how Valentine. That's what we call the Feast of Sapercalia. Now, different parts of the world, and then we're going to get back to the story of the real Valentine. Women in Japan will give chocolates to their men that they fancy. Now, chocolate, the reason why you give chocolate to anyone and this is modern times and Valentine's Day, is because they always looked upon chocolate as an aphrodisiac. And the same thing with candies. Now, they would do this on February the 14th. And then in Korea, they eat black noodles, a black noodle dish, if they don't have a partner. Because it's a day of mourning. February 14th, if you don't have a partner, is a day of mourning. In Wales, they carve spoons.
They're what?
Spoons. They carve spoons, fancy spoons. Spoons like this, see?
Oh.
I know, Sharon, you can't see this yet, but they carve these fancy spoons. And they will give them on January the 25th, and they call this Saint Dwynwen, a Welsh Jewish saint of lovers. And sometimes not just once a year. Men will carve these spoons as a token of their affection to the woman that they are infatuated with. Germans love pork. Germans love pork and pork dishes. Now, as you see on Valentine's cards, you will see hearts. You will see little cupids with arrows and things like that. This is all part of this lupercinus, and it's all part of the ancient time before Christianity. This is before Christianity. Now, the Germans, instead of having little angels flying around with arrows, they'll have little pigs.
Little pig.
They'll have pigs. Now, Valentine's Day in France is a different story. People in that nation, they would give out tokens. Men will give out tokens to women that they are attracted to. And they will go there on February the 14th, and they will cohabit. But it was not necessary for a man to stay with a woman. If she did not please him, if she was not satisfying to him, he could go to another one, pick another woman. And then the women would get together, and they'd put the names of their lovers that had forsaken them and on a piece of paper, and they would go around and dance around and cry and lament over these unfaithful men. And they would burn their names in fire. Now in Thailand, couples get married around Valentine's Day, often take part in a mountainside ceremony that involves rappelling off of ropes from dizzying heights together as an exhilarating experience. In Verona, Italy, the site of Valentine's story, they have a 4-day festival that celebrates love with heart-shaped lanterns and letter-writing contests to their loves. Love poems and love letter writing contest. Now, the old phrase to wear your heart on your sleeve is no more than just an expression. Because in different cultures, the women would take the men's names and write them on a piece of cloth and pin it to their sleeve. And when they would go through everyday life, they would have their want to be lover, want to be mate on their sleeves, men and women both. In Denmark, men give anonymous cards or joking letters called Gake Kabrev on paper snowflakes to women they might admire, secret admirers. On Valentine's Day, it was a good day to test your psychic abilities in Old England. Women would take and place bay leaves under their pillows at nighttime and hope to dream of their future mates. They would take bay leaves and put it underneath their pillows and hope that they would have dreams of their future mates. Now that's just some of the different practices. By the way, the feast in these different places, the goat skins were called fabrium. In the Roman Empire, the goat skins were called fabrium, and that's where we get the name February from.
Oh.
February. In the 14th, 15th, 16th, 1700s, they began to send Valentine cards out. You would send Valentine cards out to those you love, your mate or your future mate or your hopeful mate. Now let's go back to the real story. In February the 14th, 269 or 270 AD, there was a man that was a pastor of a church in Rome. He was arrested. The Emperor Claudius II Gothicius, Claudius had ordered all Romans to worship the state's religion of idols and made it a crime punishable by death to associate with Christians. But there were many Christians in the empire, and one of them was Valentino, or Valentine. Valentine was arrested. There was a guard, a Roman guard, that was placed in his charge to watch him. Valentino still performed marriage celebrations, and he was a doctor. He was many Baptists, by the way, were doctors. I don't know whether you know that or not. Many Baptists were doctors. He used all types of herbs and ointments and things for different ailments. The jailer, during the last few weeks of Valentine's life, asked Valentine about his faith. And he knew he was a very learned man. And this jailer had a daughter named Julia. And he asked Valentino, he said, "Could I bring my daughter to you? My daughter is blind. I would like to see if there's something that you can do for her to gain her sight." And she was a beautiful young girl, but she was blind. And she brought his blind daughter, the jailer brought his blind daughter Julia in his arms. And he brought her to Valentine's room, his cage. And Valentine knew that because of her condition that it would be very difficult to cure her ailment. But he promised her father that he would try to cure her. He said, "I'll do the best." Julia was examined, and she was given ointment for her eyes and a series of visits. The girl loved to hear Valentine talk, and he lectured her on history. He lectured her on physical science. He lectured her on the beauty of God's creation and what we call the natural world. And he also lectured her on the providence and the message of God and the gospel. She used to read the stories of Romans history to her and the great classics. He described the world and nature. He even taught her mathematics and about God. She saw the world through Valentine's eyes, and she found a comfort in that. And Julia asked Valentine one day, does God really hear our prayers? And she was a believer. She became a believer, and so did her father. They believed in the Lord Jesus Christ and the gospel. And Valentino said, yes, God hears every one of our prayers. And she asked him, do you know what I pray for every morning and every night? And he said, what do you pray for? I pray that I might see. I want so much to see everything you've told me about. And she said, I pray that God will heal my eyes that I can see. And he answered her, he said, God does what is best for us, Julia. If we believe in him, he does what is best for us. She said, oh, Valentino, I do believe. I do. She knelt and grasped his hand, and they prayed together for her sight and for the thanksgiving of salvation. Several more weeks passed, and the girl's sight was still restricted. She could not see. Yet the man and the daughter never wavered in their faith, and they returned each week. And she continued to listen to him, lecture to her, and tell her about God, and tell her about the world through his eyes. One day, Valentino finally received a visit from Roman soldiers who took him off. They destroyed all of his medicines, destroyed all of his texts of the scriptures, and destroyed everything that represented his beliefs. There was nothing that Julia's father could do to help Valentino. On the very eve of his death, Valentine wrote a message, a last note to Julia, knowing that his execution was going to happen. It was imminent. Valentino asked the jailer for a piece of paper, a pen, and ink. He quickly jotted down a farewell note and handed it to the jailer, and he said, give this to your blind daughter. He, in that letter, urged her to stay close to God and to stick by her faith and to always pray, and that he would watch after her. And he signed that letter, from your Valentine. His sentence was carried out the very next day on February the 14th, 269 or 270 AD, near a gate that was later named Porta Valentini in his memory. When the jailer went home with a note to his daughter, he handed the letter to her, the note, and the little girl opened the letter, and when she opened the note, she could see. She could see. Not only did God heal her mind, her eyes, but he healed her brain so she could understand what she saw. The little girl opened the note and discovered a yellow crocus inside. The message said, "From your Valentine." As the little girl looked down upon the crocus that spilled into her palm, she saw brilliant colors for the first time in her life. She could see the blue sky, she could see the walls, she could see the doors of her home. It was a real miracle of God. She would never see Valentine again, or Valentino. He was buried at what now they call that gate or Praxedis in Rome. Julia herself planted a pink blossomed almond tree by his grave. And every year the almond trees bloom in the middle of February, don't they? Every year the almond trees bloom, and when you see an almond tree bloom today, remember Saint Valentine. Not so much Saint Valentine, but Elder Pastor Valentine. That was a great doctor, and that gave his life for the spread of the gospel and standing for the Word of God and what he believed. Let's have a prayer. Father, we thank you for this message. We thank you for this historical note from a man of God that believed in your word, that did everything he could in his generation and in his life to be a witness for you and to show forth your light, and forgive us where we failed you, and help us be a light in a dark world. In Jesus'